How to write an argumentative research paper, a super fast primer by Mr. Bale. This, of course, will get you ready to write an argumentative research paper in the social sciences. The point of this whole paper is to prove one thought over another, one thought over another thought. Thus, it is an argument, and we have to take an opinion. The most important part of this paper is going to be your thesis statement. Historically, we actually look at the British system, and the thesis is used as a summary, but in the United States, it's used to give a preview, where we summarize the main points. What are we trying to achieve? First thing we want to achieve is to establish an opinion in our thesis. We want to introduce an opposing viewpoint. And finally, we want to have a blueprint for our paper so any reader will know exactly what we're talking about. These three elements are necessary in any thesis statement. Now, the trouble spot number one for most students is actually forming an opinion. You can't just write a paper on something, it has to be an opinion. You have to have an opinion because you have to argue for something. If your thesis doesn't provide an opinion or an opposing opinion, then it's really not a complex thesis at all. Here's some examples of what aren't opinions. The first, was rock and roll the real reason the USSR collapsed? That's merely a question. Many civilians died on both sides of the Civil War. Well, nobody's disputing that. That's simply a fact. And finally, some people say that Muhammad Ali was the greatest boxer of all time, while others say it was Rocky Marciano. Well, that's a statement. Whether you think that it's Muhammad Ali, or Rocky Marciano, or perhaps even somebody else like Pedro Sanchez from Napoleon Dynamite, you need to state who exactly you think is the best boxer if you want to go in that vein. Here's examples of what are opinions. The Soviet invasion of Afghanistan and ultimately the tremendous cost of occupying the country left the USSR bankrupt, forcing the collapse of the Soviet nation. Clearly, an opinion has been stated. The South suffered more serious civilian casualties during the United States Civil War, because those killed and injured were often children, which wiped out a sizable portion of the next generation. That is an opinion. And finally, Rocky Marciano's collaborating with Joe Louis clearly cemented him as the best boxer of all time. That is an opinion. Trouble spot number two is making sure your opposing viewpoint is actually an opposing viewpoint. You can't simply state two facts. For instance, if you said that George Washington was the greatest president of all time, and I said that John Adams was also a president, that's not an opposing viewpoint. If you say that Fritos is a great corn chip, and I come along and say that Doritos is a great tortilla chip, those are not opposing viewpoints. Or what if you said your favorite color was blue, and I said purple makes me smile? Again, not an opposing viewpoint. You have to think of opposing viewpoints as sort of battles. Here we see red versus blue, and it's an epic battle. Wow. An opposing viewpoint has to have something that's mutually exclusive about it, so we can actually take one side versus the other. Think about watching a sporting event. You root for one team or another team. When you introduce your opposing viewpoint, you want to make sure that it's actually a strong opposing viewpoint, not just some token fringe view. Let's say we're playing basketball. If I told you my basketball team just defeated the Monstars from the movie Space Jam, you might be impressed. It's a big team, they have a lot of talent, that would be a good victory. But if I told you I beat these little pee-wee kids around, you probably wouldn't be impressed. Thus, the strength of your opposing argument is important. If we're writing a thesis about the video game characters in the video game Animaniacs, I'm going to want to tell you exactly where I'm going with this. If I want to talk to you about the most dominant characters in this, I want to specifically spell out exactly what I'm going to talk about, and the blueprint will do that in my thesis statement. I'm going to be talking about jumping skills, ability to woo Hello Nurse, and mastery of paddle balls. And my subpoints in my paper will match those three, because that is what I've been writing about in my thesis statement. Let's take a look at some examples here. We've color-coded the three elements that we should expect to see in any thesis statement. We have the opposing viewpoint, we have our own viewpoint, and then we have our blueprint. So take a look at this example. As we transition to the next example, you'll notice that the actual order does not matter. As long as the three elements are clearly stated in the thesis statement, you'll be okay. The opposing viewpoint, your own viewpoint, and of course the blueprint. Whatever order is absolutely fine. In the end, when you have a completed paper, what you should see is an introduction, followed by the thesis statement, and that thesis statement should clearly spell out the blueprint of your paper. The subpoints which you mention in your blueprint should follow. The subpoint number 1, followed by an opposing viewpoint to that subpoint, followed by your refuting of that opposing viewpoint. You do the same for subpoints 2 and 3, which are probably best applicable for a 6 to 8 page research paper in the social sciences. You conclude at the end with your final thoughts. If you do so, you're going to have old people like me look at this and say, wow, what a great paper. But if you don't follow this format, it could be an absolute disaster. So, follow these simple instructions and good luck on your research. See ya.